The ceiling fan in the garage squeaked with every rotation, the only sound breaking the silence of another slow afternoon. Daniel wiped his hands on an old rag, leaving dark streaks of engine oil across the already stained fabric. He glanced at the wall clock. 3:15? In the past hour, exactly 0 customers had walked through his door. His small repair shop sat on the corner of Maple Street, sandwiched between a laundromat and a convenience store that had seen better days. The sign out front read Dan's Auto Repair, in faded letters that desperately needed repainting. But paint cost money, and money was something Daniel didn't have much of these days. He walked over to his cluttered desk and picked up his phone. 3 new notifications. His stomach dropped as he read them. Electric bill overdue, rent notice, and a text from his parts supplier asking when he could settle last month's invoice. Daniel rubbed his temples and let out a long breath. The big franchise repair center that opened 2 miles away 6 months ago was slowly killing his business. They had fancy equipment, trained staff, and advertising budgets bigger than his yearly revenue. 20 years. That's how long he'd been fixing cars in this neighborhood. He knew every regular customer by name, remembered their kids' birthdays, and always threw in free oil top-ups without being asked. But apparently that didn't matter much when people could get a coupon for half-price service at the shiny new place with air-conditioned waiting rooms and free coffee. Daniel was about to close up, early when he heard the scraping sound of metal on concrete. He looked up to see a young girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, struggling to push a bicycle through his garage entrance. The front wheel was completely jammed, and the chain hung loose like a broken necklace. She had her school backpack still strapped to her shoulders, and her cheeks were streaked with dried tears. Her glasses sat crooked on her nose, and she kept pushing them up with one frustrated gesture after another. "Excuse me, mister," she said, her voice small but determined. "I saw your sign that says you fix things. Can you fix bikes too?" Daniel set down his phone and walked over. "Well, I mostly work on cars, but let's take a look. What happened here?" The girl's words tumbled out in a rush. "I was riding home from school, and the chain made this weird noise, and then it just broke and I fell off, but I'm okay. I didn't get hurt, but now I can't ride it, and I need it to get home. And my mom doesn't know where I am, and she's probably worried, but my phone died, and I don't know what to do." She paused to catch her breath, and Daniel noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently. "Take a breath. First thing, we should call your mom. You can use my phone." Relief washed over her face. After a quick call to let her mother know she was safe and would be a bit late, the girl turned her attention back to her bicycle with worried eyes. "How much does it cost to fix?" she asked quietly. Daniel crouched down to examine the bike. It was an older model, probably a hand-me-down with scratches and rust spots that told stories of years of use. The chain had snapped right at a weak link, and the front brake pads were worn down to almost nothing. The rear wheel wobbled when he spun it. "You ride this every day?" he asked. She nodded. "To school and back. And sometimes to my friend Lucy's house on weekends. It's important because my mom works a lot and can't always drive me places." Something in her words struck a chord. Daniel remembered being that age, relying on his own beat-up bike to get everywhere because his single mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. That bike had been his freedom, his independence. "Well," he said, standing up and wiping his hands again, "this chain is definitely done for, and you need new brake pads before you hurt yourself. That back wheel needs adjusting too." The girl's face fell. She unzipped a small pocket on her backpack and pulled out a plastic sandwich bag. Inside was a collection of crumpled bills and coins. She counted carefully, her lips moving silently. "I have $8.50, she announced, looking up hopefully. "Is that enough?" Daniel felt something twist in his chest. $8.50? Probably her entire savings from birthday money and doing chores. He thought about his overdue bills waiting on the desk. He thought about the parts supplier expecting payment. He thought about rent due in a week. Then he thought about that little girl trying to ride home on a bike with no brakes. "Tell you what," Daniel said, surprising himself. "Today's your lucky day. I'm running a special. Free bike repairs for students." Her eyes went wide. "Really? Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure. But here's the deal. You've got to help me fix it. That way, next time something breaks, you'll know what to do. Sound fair?" The transformation in her face was instant. The worry disappeared, replaced by pure excitement. "Yes, I want to learn everything." For the next hour, Daniel forgot about his bills, his struggling business, and the corporate competition down the road. He showed her how to remove the broken chain, how to measure and install a new one, how to adjust the tension just right. He explained why brake pads wore down and let her help replace them. Her small fingers surprisingly nimble with the tools. "You're a natural," he told her as she successfully tightened the last bolt on the brake assembly. She beamed with pride. They moved on to the wobbly wheel, and Daniel taught her about truing, showing her how even slight bends in the rim could throw everything off balance. She watched intently, asking questions that showed she was really thinking about how everything worked together. "My grandpa used to fix things," she said quietly while Daniel made the final adjustments. "He taught me that taking care of your stuff is important. He said broken things aren't trash, they're just waiting for someone who cares enough to fix them." "Your grandpa was a smart man," Daniel replied, feeling that twist in his chest again. When they finished, the bike looked better than it had in years. The chain ran smooth, the brakes responded perfectly, and both wheels spun true. The girl ran her hand along the frame like it was precious treasure. She pulled out her plastic bag of money again. "Please, mister, take something. You spent so much time." Daniel shook his head firmly. "You keep that money. Save it for something important. This was my pleasure, really. Thank you so much." She threw her arms around him in a quick, impulsive hug before pulling back, embarrassed. "You're really nice. I wish more people were like you." As she rolled her bicycle toward the exit, Daniel called out, "Hey, ride safe, and check that chain tension every couple weeks, remember?" She gave him a thumbs up and a huge smile, then carefully rode away, testing her brakes twice before she even reached the corner. Daniel stood in his empty garage, watching her disappear down the street. He'd just spent an hour on a job that earned him nothing, and somehow he felt better than he had in months. What Daniel didn't see was the expensive black sedan parked across the street. He didn't notice the woman sitting in the driver's seat, watching the entire scene unfold through his garage entrance. He didn't see her wipe away a tear or pick up her phone to make several urgent calls. He simply turned back to his empty shop, picked up his broom, and started sweeping. Tomorrow he'd worry about the bills. Today he'd helped a kid who needed it, and sometimes that had to be enough. Daniel arrived at his shop the next morning with a coffee from the gas station and low expectations for the day ahead. Wednesday mornings were usually dead quiet, giving him too much time to think about everything going wrong in his life. He unlocked the rolling door and was about to flip the open sign when a sleek black car pulled into his small parking lot. The vehicle looked completely out of place. It was the kind of car that belonged in executive parking garages downtown, not outside his humble repair shop with its cracked concrete and faded paint. Daniel watched as a woman stepped out, and he immediately knew she didn't belong in this neighborhood either. She wore a tailored navy blue suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back in a professional style, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from boardrooms and corner offices. But there was something else in her expression as she approached. Warmth, maybe. Or curiosity. "Good morning," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Victoria Hayes. I believe you helped my daughter yesterday afternoon." It took Daniel a moment to connect the dots. The girl with the broken bike. "Oh, yeah, of course. Is everything okay? The bike working all right?" Victoria's face broke into a genuine smile. "The bike is perfect. But that's actually why I'm here. My daughter, Sophie, came home and couldn't stop talking about the nice man who fixed her bike and taught her how tools work, and didn't charge her anything, even though she offered all her savings." Daniel felt his face warm. "It was nothing, really. Just a chain and some brake pads. Took maybe an hour." "It wasn't nothing to Sophie," Victoria said firmly. "And it wasn't nothing to me. I want to pay you for your time and the parts." "No, really, I can't accept that," Daniel protested, waving his hand. "She's a kid who needed help. That's all." Victoria studied him for a long moment, and Daniel felt uncomfortably seen, like she was reading something in him that he didn't even know was written there. "Can we talk for a few minutes?" she asked. "I promise I'm not here to make you uncomfortable. I'm just curious about something." Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure, I guess. Fair warning, though, the only place to sit is that old bench over there, and it's seen better days." They sat down, and Victoria looked around the garage with genuine interest. Her eyes moved from the organized tool boards to the ancient but spotless workbenches, from the faded posters showing engine diagrams to the small coffee maker in the corner that had to be older than Daniel himself. How long have you been here? She asked. 20 years this November. Took over from the previous owner when I was barely 25. Thought I was going to change the world one oil change at a time. He laughed, but it came out bitter. Turns out the world had other plans. What do you mean? Daniel wasn't sure why he started talking. Maybe it was because she seemed genuinely interested. Maybe it was because he hadn't really talked to anyone about this stuff in months. Maybe he was just tired of keeping it all inside. Business used to be good, he said. Really good. I had regular customers, word of mouth kept me busy, and I made enough to live on and save a little. Nothing fancy but honest work, you know? Then that big franchise place opened up down the road. Autotech Pro or whatever they call themselves. Suddenly everyone wants to go there because they have coupons and rewards programs and waiting rooms with flat-screen TVs. Victoria nodded, encouraging him to continue. And I get it, Daniel went on. They've got marketing budgets and professional management. Me, I've got a squeaky ceiling fan and a sign that needs repainting. I can't compete with that. My customers are leaving one by one. The ones who stay are mostly people who've known me for years and feel loyal. But even they're starting to drift away. Can't blame them for wanting to save money. But you're still here, Victoria observed. For now. Rent's going up next month. Supplier wants payment on parts I bought 2 months ago. Electric company sent me a final notice yesterday. He stopped, suddenly embarrassed. Sorry, I don't know why I'm dumping all this on you. You didn't come here for my sob story. Actually, Victoria said carefully, I came here because my daughter told me something last night that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Daniel looked at her. Curious. She said you told her that broken things aren't trash. They're just waiting for someone who cares enough to fix them. She said her grandfather used to say that and she was amazed that you believed the same thing. Smart kid. And her grandfather was right. Do you really believe that? Or is it just something nice to say? Daniel thought about it. Yeah, I believe it. I mean, look around. Half the stuff people throw away just needs a little attention. A loose connection here, a worn belt there. But it's easier to buy new than to fix old. Faster. More convenient. Except we lose something in that process. We lose the idea that things have value beyond their immediate usefulness. Victoria was quiet for a moment. What about people? Do you think the same applies to people? What do you mean? Do you think organizations, companies, institutions can be fixed when they're broken? Or do some things just need to be thrown out and replaced? It was a strange question, and Daniel wondered where this conversation was actually going. I guess it depends on whether the foundation is still solid. If the core is good but the execution got messed up somewhere, then yeah, probably worth fixing. Why? Victoria stood up and walked over to the wall where Daniel had hung various certifications and a few photos. One showed him as a young man, grinning proudly on his first day owning the shop. Another showed him with a group of neighborhood kids he'd taught basic bike repair to one summer years ago. Can I ask you something that might sound odd? She said, not turning around. Sure. What would you do if someone gave you unlimited resources to run this shop exactly the way you think a repair business should be run? No financial pressure, no competition undercutting you, just pure freedom to do it right? Daniel laughed. That's a nice fantasy. Humor me. He leaned back on the bench thinking, I'd focus on building real relationships with customers. Take time to explain what's actually wrong with their vehicles instead of just handing them a bill. I'd charge fair prices, not inflated ones. I'd train my mechanics if I could afford to hire any, to care about the work, not just punch a clock. I'd be honest even when it cost me money, like telling someone they don't actually need a repair instead of inventing problems. Anything else? I'd find ways to help people who are struggling. Single parents who can't afford major repairs but need their car to get to work. Elderly folks on fixed incomes. Students. People like that girl yesterday. There's already enough people in this world trying to squeeze every dollar out of everybody else. Maybe someone should do the opposite. Victoria turned around and there was something intense in her expression. What if I told you that you could do all of that? What if I told you I could make it possible? Daniel frowned. I'd say you're either messing with me or you've got the wrong guy. I'm not messing with you, Daniel. And you're exactly the right guy. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I'm the CEO of Hartwell Enterprises. We own a chain of 214 auto service centers across the country. We're profitable, we're growing, and we're completely soulless. Daniel stared at the card. Hartwell Enterprises. He'd heard of them. They were huge, corporate, everything he usually avoided. Yesterday, I sat in my car across the street and watched you spend an hour teaching my daughter how to fix her bike. You refused to take money from a child who offered you literally every cent she had. And you did it on a day when, based on what you just told me, you desperately needed that money. Victoria sat back down beside him. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how many people would have taken her $8 and sent her on her way with a quick fix? That would have been wrong, Daniel said simply. Exactly. That's my point. You have something my company lost somewhere along the way. You have integrity. And I want to know if you'd be willing to help me bring that back to Hartwell. Daniel felt like the conversation had jumped tracks somewhere, and he'd missed the turn. I'm sorry, what? I want to hire you as a consultant. More than that, actually. I want to rebuild my entire company philosophy around the principles you just described, and I want you to lead that transformation. You're serious, completely serious. I'll pay you more than you'd make in 10 years here. You keep your shop exactly as it is, it becomes our flagship location. You travel to our other centers, train people, change the culture, help me fix something broken. Daniel sat there, his mind spinning. It sounded impossible. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded terrifying. I need time to think about this, he finally said. Victoria smiled. That's a good answer. A desperate person would have said yes immediately. Someone with integrity wants to think it through. She stood up. Take your time. My number's on the card. Call me when you've decided. She walked back to her car, then paused and turned around. Daniel, thank you for being kind to my daughter. Whatever you decide about my offer, that mattered. A lot. As the black car pulled away, Daniel sat alone in his garage holding a business card that might change his entire life. The ceiling fan squeaked overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. He had a lot to think about. For 3 days, Daniel carried Victoria's business card in his pocket like it was burning a hole through the fabric. He'd pull it out during slow moments, stare at the embossed letters, then shove it back before he could talk himself into anything stupid. On Thursday night, he sat at his kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills, doing math that didn't work no matter how many times he tried. The numbers were simple and brutal. Without a major change, he had maybe 2 months before he'd have to close the shop for good. That made Victoria's offer look like a life preserver thrown to a drowning man, but something held him back. Friday morning, an older woman named Mrs. Chen brought in her ancient Honda. Daniel had been servicing her car for 15 years. She was probably 75 now, living on Social Security, and her car was the only way she could get to her doctor appointments and the grocery store. It's making a funny noise, she said apologetically, like she was bothering him. Daniel spent 40 minutes tracking down the problem. A loose heat shield, 5-minute fix. He tightened it up, checked her fluids, and noticed her tires were getting worn. Not dangerous yet, but they'd need replacing in a few months. How much do I owe you? Mrs. Chen asked, reaching for her purse. Nothing today. Just a loose bolt. But you should start thinking about new tires soon. Maybe in another month or 2. Her face tightened with worry. How much will that cost? Depends on what you get, but probably around $400 for a decent set. He watched her do the mental math, calculating what that would mean for her fixed income. Okay, she said quietly. I'll start saving. After she left, Daniel thought about the big chain down the road. They would have charged her a diagnostic fee, probably invented a few extra problems, and pushed her to buy tires today with their high-pressure sales tactics. They had quotas to meet, shareholders to please, numbers that mattered more than people. That afternoon, he called Victoria. I want to see some of your locations, he told her. Before I decide anything, I need to know what I'd be getting into. That's fair, she said. How about tomorrow? I'll have my assistant arrange access to 3 of our centers. You can go alone incognito. Ask questions, watch how things work. Get a real feel for it. Saturday morning found Daniel driving to the first Hartwell Service Center. It was impressive from the outside. Modern building, clean lot, professional signage. Inside, the waiting room looked like a coffee shop with comfortable chairs, free Wi-Fi, and a big TV playing the news. But Daniel didn't stay in the waiting room. He wandered back toward the service bays, notebook in hand, pretending to be a curious potential customer. What he saw made his stomach turn. A mechanic was working on a sedan, and Daniel watched him complete a brake inspection. The pads had at least 40% life left. Easy. But the mechanic marked them down as needing immediate replacement. When Daniel casually asked about it, the guy shrugged. Company policy. We recommend replacement at 50%. Gotta meet our numbers. At the second location, Daniel saw a service advisor trying to upsell a customer on a transmission flush they clearly didn't need. The customer was a young woman, probably mid-20s, who obviously didn't know much about cars. She looked overwhelmed and intimidated. "Your transmission fluid is dirty," the advisor said, showing her a dipstick. "If you don't flush it now, you're risking serious damage. Could cost you thousands down the road." Daniel knew that fluid was fine. He'd been doing this long enough to spot the color from across the room. But the woman, scared and unsure, agreed to the $500 service. The third location was more of the same. High-pressure tactics, unnecessary services, mechanics who'd stopped caring about the work and just wanted to get through their shift. Daniel talked to a few of them on their breaks, and the story was always similar. "Used to love this job," one older mechanic told him. "Been doing it 30 years, but now, everything's timed, everything's tracked. Get written up if you spend too long on a job. Get written up if your upsell numbers are low. It's not about fixing cars anymore. It's about hitting targets." Daniel left that third location feeling angry and depressed. This was the company Victoria wanted him to help fix. It wasn't just broken. It was systematically designed to take advantage of people who didn't know better. The whole operation ran on fear and deception. He sat in his truck in the parking lot and pulled out his phone. Part of him wanted to call Victoria right then and tell her thanks, but no thanks. He didn't want any part of this corporate machine that chewed up good mechanics and spit out salespeople in grease-stained uniforms. But then he thought about that older mechanic. 30 years of experience, and he'd lost his love for the work because of the system he was trapped in. Daniel thought about all the other mechanics across those 200 locations. How many of them had started out passionate and skilled, only to get beaten down by quotas and pressure. He thought about the customers getting ripped off every single day, young people who didn't know any better, elderly folks on fixed incomes being scared into unnecessary services, single parents already struggling to make ends meet. What if he could actually change that? What if Victoria was serious about transforming the company? But could he even do it? Daniel was one guy who ran a small shop in a quiet neighborhood. These were corporate executives with business degrees and decades of experience. Who was he to tell them how to run their company? Sunday evening, Victoria called him. "So, what did you think?" Daniel didn't sugarcoat it. "I think your company is everything I hate about corporate auto repair. I watched your people push unnecessary services on customers who trusted them. I watched mechanics who stopped caring because your system beat the passion out of them. Honestly, I'm not sure it can be fixed. I think it might be too far gone." There was a long pause on the other end. "You're not wrong," Victoria said quietly. "Everything you just described is exactly why I need your help. My husband built this company from nothing. When he died 3 years ago, I inherited it. I tried to keep his vision alive, but somehow it all got twisted. The executives convinced me that margins and efficiency were what mattered, that we had to compete with the other chains by playing their game. So why change now?" Daniel asked. "Because of Sophie. Because I watched my daughter come home with her fixed bicycle, excited about learning how a chain works, talking about the nice man who treated her like she mattered. And I realized that's what my husband would have done. He would have stopped and helped that kid. The company he built was supposed to help people, not exploit them." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've been feeling like I failed him, like I let his life's work turn into something he would have hated. When I saw you with Sophie, it was like seeing a reminder of what we were supposed to be." Daniel stared out his window at the streetlights flickering on in the dusk. "If I did this," he said slowly, "I'd want real authority. Not just some consultant title where I make suggestions and everyone ignores me. If I'm going to try to fix this mess, I need the power to actually make changes. You'd have it. I'll put it in the contract. Full operational authority over service protocols, training programs, and quality standards. The executives will answer to you on anything related to customer service and shop operations. They're going to hate me. Probably. But I'll back you up. I own controlling interest in the company. They can complain all they want." Daniel took a deep breath. This was crazy. This was completely insane. He'd be leaving his small, safe world where he understood everything and everyone. He'd be walking into a corporate environment that would probably chew him up and spit him out. But he kept thinking about that mechanic who'd lost his passion. He kept thinking about all those customers being taken advantage of. He kept thinking about Mrs. Chen and people like her, going to these places because they didn't have other options, getting charged for services they didn't need. "I want to keep my shop," Daniel said, "exactly as it is. That's non-negotiable. Of course. And I want to be able to walk away if it becomes clear this isn't working. I'm not signing my life away to corporate hell. Fair enough. And I want you to understand something, Victoria. If I do this, I'm going to do it my way. That means honesty even when it costs money. That means treating customers like people, not profit centers. That means building a culture that values integrity over sales numbers. A lot of people in your company aren't going to like that. I know. That's exactly why it has to be you. Daniel closed his eyes. His logical brain was screaming at him to say no. This was too risky, too uncertain, too far outside his comfort zone. But another part of him, the part that still believed broken things could be fixed, was whispering that maybe this was why he'd become a mechanic in the first place. Not just to fix cars, to fix the way people treated each other. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. God help us both, but I'll do it. Thank you, Daniel. I really think we can make a difference. I hope you're right. Because if this goes sideways, I'm going to lose the only thing I've got left. After he hung up, Daniel sat in the darkness of his living room for a long time. He'd just agreed to something that terrified him. But beneath the fear, there was something else. Something he hadn't felt in months. Hope, fragile and uncertain, but there. Maybe he could actually pull this off. Maybe he could take everything wrong with corporate auto repair and somehow make it right, or maybe he just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd find out soon enough. The first corporate meeting nearly broke Daniel before he even started. He walked into the Hartwell Enterprises headquarters on a Monday morning wearing his best shirt and tie, feeling like a fish flopping around on dry land. The building was all glass and steel, with marble floors so shiny he could see his reflection. Everyone moved with purpose, talking on phones, carrying tablets, looking important. Victoria met him in the lobby and led him to the executive conference room on the 15th floor. 12 people sat around a massive table. Vice presidents, directors, regional managers. They all had titles that sounded impressive and expressions that said they'd already decided Daniel was wasting their time. Everyone, this is Daniel Webb, Victoria announced. He'll be leading our customer service transformation initiative. Daniel has full operational authority over service protocols, training, and quality standards. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. A man in an expensive suit, probably mid-50s, leaned back in his chair. With all due respect, Victoria, what exactly are Mr. Webb's qualifications? Does he have any corporate experience? Any management training? Any background in scaling operations across multiple locations? No, Daniel said before Victoria could answer. I don't. I run a small shop. Just me, no fancy credentials. But I know how to treat customers right, and from what I've seen, that's something this company forgot how to do. The room erupted. Not literally, but the energy shifted to barely controlled outrage. The executives took turns explaining, in increasingly condescending tones, why Daniel's small shop mentality wouldn't work at scale. They talked about profit margins, operational efficiency, competitive positioning, shareholder value. You can't just be nice to customers and expect to survive, a woman with severe glasses said. This is a business, not a charity. We have stockholders who expect returns on their investment. And how are those returns looking lately? Daniel asked. Victoria had shown him the numbers. Customer satisfaction scores were in the basement. Online reviews were brutal. Repeat business was declining. Because from what I can see, your current approach is driving people away. That's a temporary fluctuation, another executive jumped in. The market is adjusting to new competition. It's not the market, Daniel said, feeling his frustration rise. It's your mechanics pushing services people don't need. It's your advisors scaring customers into unnecessary repairs. It's your whole system that treats people like walking wallets instead of human beings who need help. The meeting went downhill from there. By the end, nothing was resolved except that everyone in that room hated Daniel. And the feeling was mutual. That went well, he said to Victoria afterward, unable to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. Better than I expected, actually, she replied. At least we know where everyone stands. Now comes the hard part. You need to prove them wrong. The hard part turned out to be even harder than Daniel imagined. He started at the training center where new mechanics learned Hartwell's systems. The curriculum was all about speed and efficiency. Complete an oil change in 12 minutes. Brake job in 45. Every service had a timer, and falling behind meant getting written up. There was an entire section on upselling techniques, teaching mechanics how to identify opportunities to increase ticket prices. Daniel threw out the whole program and started over. He brought in mechanics from his network, people who still cared about the craft. They created new training focused on actually diagnosing problems, explaining repairs in plain language customers could understand, and being honest even when it meant making less money. The executives fought him on every change. "This will destroy our efficiency metrics," they complained. "Service times will increase. Revenue per customer will drop." "Good," Daniel said, "because your current metrics are measuring all the wrong things." He traveled to service centers across the country, spending days at each location. He'd show up unannounced, watch how things operated, talk to mechanics and advisors. What he found was always the same story. Good people trapped in a bad system, doing things they knew were wrong because they needed the paycheck. At a location in Ohio, a mechanic named Tony pulled him aside during a break. "Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do," he said quietly, "but I've got a mortgage and 2 kids in college. If I don't hit my upsell numbers, I'm out. That's reality." "What if the numbers changed?" Daniel asked. "What if we measured customer satisfaction instead of revenue per ticket? What if we rewarded honesty instead of sales?" Tony looked at him like he'd suggested they start flying to the moon. "That's a nice dream, man. But it's not how the world works." "Then maybe we change how the world works." But changing the world turned out to be exhausting. Daniel spent 16-hour days rewriting policies, conducting training sessions, and fighting with executives who blocked every reform. He'd return to his hotel room each night, collapse on the bed and wonder what he'd gotten himself into. 3 months in, the numbers were ugly. Customer revenue was down 15%. Service times had increased. The executives called emergency meetings to show Victoria graphs and charts proving Daniel's approach was destroying the company. "We're bleeding money," the CFO declared. "If this continues, we'll need to start closing locations. This experiment has failed." Daniel sat at that conference table, exhausted and defeated, ready to admit they were right. He'd been naive to think he could change something this big. You couldn't fight corporate culture with good intentions. The system was too strong, too established, too focused on quarterly profits. "Give it 6 more months," Victoria said. 6 months? The CFO sputtered. "We'll be bankrupt. We have the reserves, and I'm not ready to give up yet." But Daniel was ready to give up. He almost quit twice in the next month. Once after a particularly brutal meeting where a regional director told him he was destroying everything the company had built. Once, after a long day at a service center where the manager had undermined every change Daniel tried to implement the moment he left. He was packing his bag in another generic hotel room, ready to call Victoria and tell her it was over, when his phone rang. "Unknown number, is this Daniel?" a woman's voice asked. "The guy doing the new training program?" "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Helen. I brought my car into your Milwaukee location last week. The advisor, young guy named Chris, told me I didn't actually need the transmission service the computer system recommended. Said my transmission was fine, just needed the fluid topped off. Charged me $30 instead of $500. Daniel remembered Chris, good kid, fresh out of training. Actually listened to what Daniel taught him. He told me about the new policies, Helen continued. How you're trying to make the company honest again. I just wanted to call and say thank you. I'm a teacher, I don't make much money, and that $500 would have hurt. You're doing something good. Don't stop. She hung up before Daniel could respond. He sat there holding his phone, staring at the wall. One person. One honest interaction. One customer who wasn't ripped off. Maybe that was enough to keep going. The next month, something shifted. Customer reviews started improving. A few locations that had fully embraced the new approach saw repeat business increase. A local news station in Arizona did a story about how Hartwell Service Center had refused to charge a single mother for repairs she didn't need, instead fixing the actual problem for less than half the original quote. The story went viral on social media. Suddenly, people were talking about Hartwell differently. Not as another corporate chain trying to squeeze every dollar, but as a company that actually cared. Other news outlets picked up the story. Customers started specifically seeking out Hartwell locations because they'd heard about the new honest approach. By month 7, revenue wasn't just recovered. It had grown by 18%. Customer satisfaction scores were climbing steadily. Mechanics who'd been going through the motions started caring again. The culture was shifting, slowly but genuinely. At the next executive meeting, the atmosphere was different. Not friendly exactly, but less hostile. The CFO presented new numbers showing sustained growth. The VP of Operations mentioned that employee retention had improved significantly. "I'll admit," the severe glasses woman said, "I didn't think this would work. I'm still not entirely convinced it's sustainable long term. But the data is becoming hard to ignore." Daniel didn't gloat. He was too tired for that. It works because people want to be treated with respect. Customers and employees both. That's not complicated business theory. It's just being decent. After the meeting, Victoria caught up with him in the hallway. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." "We're not done yet," Daniel replied. "We've got a long way to go. Maybe half the locations are really on board. The other half are just going through the motions, waiting for this to blow over. But it's working. You proved them wrong." Daniel thought about all the sleepless nights, the fights with executives, the moments he'd wanted to quit. He thought about mechanics like Tony and customers like Helen. He thought about his little shop back home waiting for him. "Yeah," he said finally, allowing himself a small smile. "I guess we did, but the real test was still coming." Because changing a company culture wasn't a 6-month project. It was a long-term commitment that required constant vigilance. Daniel knew that the moment he stopped pushing, things would slip back to the old ways. The transformation had begun. But keeping it going, that would be the real challenge. 2 years later, Daniel stood backstage at the Hartwell Enterprises annual meeting, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. He still wasn't comfortable in suits, probably never would be. But today was important and Victoria had insisted he dress the part. "You ready?" she asked, walking up beside him. She looked calm, but Daniel knew her well enough now to see the excitement in her eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be. Still not sure why I need to give a speech, though. You're the CEO. Because this story isn't about me. It's about what happens when someone refuses to compromise their principles, even when everyone says it's impossible." The auditorium was packed with employees, shareholders, and business journalists. Daniel walked onto the stage to polite applause, looked out at the sea of faces, and felt his stomach flip. Public speaking had never been his thing. Give him an engine to rebuild any day over this, but he thought about why he was here. About all the mechanics who'd rediscovered their passion for the work. About all the customers who'd been treated honestly. About proving that you didn't have to choose between profit and principles. 2 years ago, he began, his voice a little shaky. I was about 2 months away from losing my shop. Business was dying. Bills were piling up, and I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. Then a kid walked in with a broken bicycle, and everything changed. He told the story simply. The girl with the broken chain, the hour spent teaching her to fix it, the refusal to take her money. He told them about Victoria showing up the next day with an offer that sounded crazy. He told them about visiting the service centers and being horrified by what he saw. I almost said no, Daniel admitted, because I looked at this company and saw everything wrong with corporate culture. I saw good mechanics turned into salespeople. I saw customers being taken advantage of. I saw a system built on treating people like they didn't matter. The room was completely silent now. But then I realized something. All those mechanics? They didn't start out wanting to rip people off. They started out loving cars, wanting to fix things, hoping to make a difference. The system beat that out of them. And I thought, what if we could build a different system, one that brought that passion back? He talked about the resistance he'd faced, the executives who fought every change, the mechanics who didn't believe it could work, the customers who were suspicious at first because they'd been burned too many times before. We lost money for the first 6 months. The board wanted to fire me. Some of you probably still wish they had. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. But then something happened. People started noticing. They started trusting us again. And it turned out that when you treat customers with respect and mechanics with dignity, good things happen. Business grows. Not despite doing the right thing, but because of it. The applause when he finished was genuine and loud. Daniel stepped off the stage feeling lighter than he had in months. But the best part of the day came afterward. Victoria had arranged a special presentation in the smaller conference room. When Daniel walked in, he saw Sophie standing at the front, now 12 years old and considerably taller than when they'd first met. She looked nervous but determined, just like she had that day with her broken bike. "Hi, Daniel," she said, smiling. "Remember me?" "Of course I do. How's the bike?" "Still working great. You taught me well." She held up a plaque. This is the first annual Hartwell Heart Award. It goes to the mechanic who best represents what our company is supposed to be about. Someone who sees people, not just profit. Someone who cares more about doing the right thing than making the easy dollar. Daniel felt his throat tighten. This year's winner is Roberto Mendez, from our Phoenix location. Sophie gestured, and a mechanic in his early 30s walked forward looking stunned. Roberto was working on a customer's car and found a serious safety issue with the steering. The customer couldn't afford the repair. Roberto spent his own money on the parts and fixed it after hours on his own time, because he couldn't let someone drive an unsafe vehicle. The room erupted in applause. Roberto accepted the plaque with tears in his eyes, and when he shook Daniel's hand, he whispered, "Thank you for showing us this was okay. For making it okay to care again." Later that evening, Daniel drove back to his original shop. Victoria had been true to her word. The place remained exactly as it had been, though now it was officially designated as the Hartwell Training Center. Every new mechanic in the company spent their first month here, learning not from a manual but from Daniel himself, working on real cars for real customers. The "We Fix Anything" sign still hung above the door, faded and familiar. Daniel ran his hand over it as he unlocked the entrance. Inside, everything was the same. The squeaky ceiling fan, the organized toolboards, the old coffee maker still brewing in the corner. But now, instead of being empty and quiet, the shop was alive. 3 young mechanics were working on different vehicles, and 2 more were in the corner, practicing diagnostic procedures on a training engine. They all looked up when Daniel entered. "Hey boss," one called out. "Got a tricky one over here if you've got a minute. Customer said it stalls randomly, but I can't replicate the problem." Daniel walked over, genuinely happy to get his hands dirty again. For all the boardrooms and presentations and corporate meetings, this was still what he loved: the smell of motor oil, the satisfaction of solving a mechanical puzzle, the simple act of fixing something broken. He still spent 2 days a week here, refusing to let his new role completely separate him from the actual work. Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons, without fail, he was in this garage, sometimes teaching, sometimes just working alongside the trainees, sometimes, like today, helping troubleshoot a stubborn problem. "Check the crankshaft position sensor," he suggested after listening to the engine. Intermittent stalling is usually electrical, and that sensor going bad would cause exactly these symptoms. The young mechanic's face lit up. "I should have thought of that. Thanks." As the sun set, Daniel found himself alone in the garage, sweeping the floor just like he had 2 years ago when his biggest worry was making rent. Except now, he wasn't just keeping one small shop alive. He was part of something bigger. 214 locations, thousands of mechanics, hundreds of thousands of customers every year, and it all started because he'd taken an hour to help a kid fix her bike. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Board meeting next month. They want to expand the program to our tire centers too. Your philosophy is working. They're finally believers." Daniel smiled and pocketed his phone. He thought about Roberto, spending his own money to keep a stranger safe. He thought about all the mechanics who were rediscovering why they'd fallen in love with this work in the first place. He thought about customers like Helen, who could trust that they weren't being taken advantage of. The transformation wasn't complete. Probably never would be. There were still locations that struggled with the new culture. Still executives who thought the old ways were better. Still days when Daniel wondered if he was fighting a losing battle against corporate nature. But then he'd get a call from a customer thanking him. Or hear about a mechanic going above and beyond. Or spend an afternoon teaching someone who genuinely wanted to learn. And he'd remember why this mattered. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Victoria. Sophie on her bike, now decorated with stickers and streamers, grinning at the camera. The message read, "She still tells everyone about the nice mechanic who taught her to fix things. Says she wants to be an engineer now. Thank you for being kind to my kid." Daniel looked around his garage one more time before turning off the lights. The old shop that had almost gone under. The place where he'd spent 20 years building a reputation, one honest interaction at a time. The space that had taught him you didn't need fancy equipment or corporate backing to make a difference. You just needed to care, and now that lesson was spreading, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. Across hundreds of locations, thousands of mechanics were learning that broken things weren't trash. They were just waiting for someone who cared enough to fix them. That applied to bicycles, It applied to cars. It applied to people. And apparently, it even applied to corporations. Daniel locked the door and walked to his truck. Tomorrow he'd be back in meetings, fighting the good fight, pushing for more changes. But tonight he'd done what he did best. Fixed things, taught someone, made a small corner of the world a little bit better. And really, when you got down to it, that's all any of us could do. Take care of the people and things right in front of us. Be honest even when it costs something. Choose integrity over convenience. Help the kid with the broken bike. The rest would follow. As Daniel drove home through the quiet streets, he thought about how strange life was. How one small act of kindness could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagine. How being decent wasn't just good for your soul. Sometimes, if you were lucky, it could change everything. He'd fixed a bike for a kid who needed help. And somehow in the process, he'd helped fix a company that had lost its way. Not bad for a mechanic who'd almost given up. Not bad at all.